This is Ask an Expat with Marcus and Matt from An Expat's Russia, where we answer your questions about what it's like to live, work, and travel in Russia.
Hi everyone, welcome to today's video. Today we're going to talk about our experience of visiting Russia this past summer. Both Marcus and I spent a considerable amount of time in Russia, and we just kind of wanted to share our thoughts on what it was like having not been there for a long time and during COVID. Marcus, kind of what were your first thoughts?
Matt, I'm the type of person I compare everything. I've been to several different countries. I've lived in, for a long period of time. So, especially after COVID, being in Germany and thinking, oh, it's like this in the US, it's like this in Russia. So I actually went, I drove to Russia, and you understand the bureaucracy of like getting over the border and things.
Of course.
So I was kind of excited because I like driving, going on road trips. So we get on the ferry in Germany, we get to Helsinki, and then we drive from Helsinki to the border of Finland and Russia. And there was nobody there. And we pull up because of COVID, right? Limited,
Right.
people can cross the border. So I was like, oh, this is going to be so fast. We're going to just go through. And, we spent about 2 hours there, and there were like probably 6 or 7 cars.
Yeah.
And their system was down, the electricity went out, and I was like,
welcome to Russia.
So it was a little bit of a, that's not the longest I've spent at the border. I've spent, one time 4 hours, one time 8 hours, like on when lots of Russians and mostly, Russians would go to Finland or Latvia, to Europe on vacation during vacation time, and then coming back is really when you're waiting there. But this time it was just, there weren't that many workers. The Finnish side I got through quite quickly, and just they had a new paper to fill out for the temporary import on my car.
Right.
And I was like, I hope this isn't an indication of the
What's
trip.
to come, yeah.
But that's part of traveling, especially during COVID. They had kind of a very quick, do you have your COVID test, you just kind of show it, and they almost like they're not even looking at it. We crossed into Russia, and they've been working on the road from the border to St. Petersburg, basically all that Vyborg area. So then we get on the toll road, so it was much better after that long wait. But that was kind of the initial, the start of my trip. What about you?
Yeah, well, for me, I thought it was going to be relatively easy. We flew into Sheremetyevo, and as soon as we got there, it was just, there was nobody at the passport control line, so we breezed through that. But as soon as you got through that, the way they set it up at Sheremetyevo was there was like, you come down the escalators to the baggage claim, and there was just pandemonium. They had just instituted, this was in the middle of June, they had just instituted more strict checks, of all of the COVID documents, and they also started doing COVID tests in the airport for foreigners. So it was funny, I arrived there with my daughter and my wife, and my wife's a Russian citizen, so she didn't have to do anything. But me and my daughter, we had to do COVID tests on the spot before we could get our bags. And it was a total mess, and it was just like this little, nurse station set up in the middle of the baggage claim area, and people were running around, what do I have to do, what do I have to do? And the people who were working there had no idea either, which was quite frustrating. And the funniest part was that they gave foreigners COVID tests for free in the airport, and they said, welcome to Russia, you're all good. But then my wife had to do 2 COVID tests within 3 days at her own expense, like $80. So it was just kind of funny. Like foreigners kind of just breeze through, you do your test when you arrive. They didn't even care about the test that we had to get there, which was weird. Okay. They didn't even check that. They're just like, no, you need to do one now. And so
I see.
Kind of frustrating in that regard. But once we got through that, it was tough to get a taxi for some reason too. I ended up paying for one of the more expensive ones, so that made at least the ride to the Airbnb we were staying at nice. But then the Russia problems start. As soon as we got to the Airbnb, there was a Schlagbaum, like a barrier, and they were like, nope, no taxis can come in here. And the building is, I don't know, 200 meters away. So we're like, we have a car seat, we've got 3 suitcases. And the guy at the Schlagbaum or the barrier was just arguing, no, you can't come in here. And the taxi driver was trying, to help us. And no, we had to like lug all these bags through this park. It was just total ridiculous, right? Like why can't a taxi come up to the building?
Right.
Anyway,
right.
But after that, it got a little bit easier. But I would say in general, the taxi situation in Moscow is way more stressful than it used to be. They instituted some new rules where the taxi cannot stand for more than 30 seconds on the side of the road unless there's a dedicated taxi stop. And so within the Yandex Taxi app, it tries to direct you to choose a pickup point where they can sit.
Okay.
But oh my gosh, I had a number of taxi drivers. If we were not standing right there at the instant, or he just drove past the dot, he would just get out and start arguing with me like, you weren't here, I can get fined, 5,000 rubles for sitting here.
Right.
And it's just frustrating. I can imagine if you don't speak Russian, that would be very off-putting.
Let's just make it clear. So, Matt, this was your first experience with a young child, or
yes, I was going to say
having children, and I knew all those things, having 2 kids. My 2 oldest were quite young when we were living there, but that's another reason why I chose to drive my car to St. Petersburg, because I just renting the car seats, and you can do the tax. I mean, taxis are very affordable, but with children, sometimes you don't get the right car seat, even if you order it. And
yes, I was going to bring that up.
If you don't speak Russian, that's the toughest part.
The other thing that was frustrating is that sometimes you would get a taxi that didn't have the right seat, right? And what happens? Mm-hmm. Well, I learned later that they instituted also another law that all children must be in a car seat, even in a taxi, which I don't even think that's a law in the United States. And so one time he showed up and didn't have the car seat, and I showed him, look, I ordered with a car seat, and he was nice about it, but he's like, I can't take you. So you have to sit there and order a new taxi, and when you're ordering with the
fine.
Right, and when you're trying to order a taxi with a car seat, there are significantly fewer of them in the fleet, so you always have to wait longer anyway. So he gets there, he can't take you, you have to order another one, the baby's screaming. It's very frustrating with taxis and a little girl, a little baby.
But were you only using Yandex Taxi, or just like several different apps?
I tried, they only really have Get and Yandex, and then they have those couple super local options, which we didn't really utilize.
I used Roo Taxi, and Wheelie is the
Did you use Wheelie? Because for me,
I've never used Wheelie. No.
There were no options. Maybe I just wasn't looking right, but I didn't remember seeing any options for a baby seat. So.
Possibly. At one time I had like 6 or 7 different apps for taxis on my mobile phone, because what we would do when we were in Moscow, we would help tourists get from the airport, and I was constantly comparing like what the services are. And Mobile Taxi or City Mobile had a fairly comprehensive option where you could choose several different cars, you could choose even a van, but I mean the competition in Moscow for those kind of tech companies
I shouldn't
pretty
complain,
good,
honestly, about the child seats, because in the US you can't even get an Uber with a child seat. It's literally not even an option. Either
not even
take your own car seat.
You can't find that in the app?
Nope. At least not in Houston where we live.
Well, in
literally
Germany, it annoys me. It doesn't even exist. Like all the taxi, it's regulated. So if I want a taxi to the airport, that's like 45 minutes from me. It's like 70 to 80 euros. So when I get to Russia and order a taxi for like 10 or 15 euros, I'm ecstatic because it's so cheap.
We ordered when we arrived the quickest taxi I could get. Really, the regular taxi said 40 minutes to pick us up. We've already flown 15 hours. We were tired. The only taxi that we could get within 10 minutes was the Business Plus. So I ordered that. Shows up. It's blacked out Mercedes E-Class. It's like $100,000 car. $45 to take us all the way to the center of Moscow. And the guy gets out in his suit and is opening the door and helping install the car seat. It was fantastic.
Nice.
But if you do the cheaper taxis, it can be very frustrating.
Yeah, yeah. Well, imagine if you don't speak. I mean, even the driver. There are some apps where you can indicate that you speak English, right?
Yeah.
And then the amount of drivers who know some English, it's not at a high level, but you get lucky sometimes. I got this one Georgian driver who lived in New York 12 years or something, and
we had an Armenian guy just the same. He wanted to speak English. Yeah.
So yeah, it's kind of hit or miss with that, even if you indicate English. But if you don't speak Russian, then you can't have that kind of chit chat or a nice,
right.
I wouldn't say deep conversation, but it's nice to the driver. Generally, after a long drive, they warm up to you, and you kind of have a nice chat. First time getting to Russia.
Right. Well, I would say in general, the biggest struggle of being in Russia with a small child was definitely transportation. I mean, it's easy enough to get on the bus with a stroller, but the metro, for example, there's not elevators everywhere. So like you have to take the baby out of the stroller, carry the baby as you go down the escalator. I mean, it's very, very hectic. Like I'm used to just trying to go everywhere, not at the last minute, right? But you don't give yourself a big enough buffer when you're single or just a couple. Then with a child, you're just like going crazy because everything takes way longer than you expect. And in the US, you're just used to putting the baby in the car, you drive where you're going, you get out, and that's it. Whereas in Russia, there's a lot more to it, especially if you're using a taxi or the metro. But generally, that was kind of the only frustration I really had with the trip overall was just transportation, getting around.
Right. And how would it be when you compare, if you're a tourist in the US? I just heard, from friends who visited the US, they didn't have a car. They're like, how do you live here without a car? You can't even get anywhere. At least in bigger cities in Russia, you have the
that is a good point. It's a good point.
But if you're a tourist and you go to, I don't know, like if you went to Portland, I guess you can use the Max, but I mean it's nowhere near compared to Moscow or St. Petersburg.
Right. No, I mean we're kind of nitpicking because you're in two different situations. You and I kind of talked about this when I was in Russia. I'm comparing the difficulties of using taxis and public transportation to having my own car, and being able to park.
That's why I brought my own car this time.
So yeah, with a family, definitely
the wait at the border when you're in Russia for a short period of time without kids, it doesn't matter. You can fly in, you can you're
absolutely
mobile. But the wait at the border is totally worth it when you spend several weeks, with kids. Right. I would posit that if you're within driving distance, obviously not a lot of people are. I guess our European viewers, if we have any, are within driving distance, but it's also much cheaper, after 2 people or so.
Right.
So the wait at the border is really worth it, just to kind of put stuff in your car. You don't have to worry about weight that much,
Right.
So another thing that I noticed right away that I had forgotten is in 2019 we moved to Germany, and then in Germany you have the Autobahn, you have very organized, although construction is everywhere in Germany, but also in Russia it was too. But you have very high quality roads. Mm-hmm. People aren't driving so crazy, trying to pass people, unless you're on the Autobahn and it's kind of, available. But I noticed we went to visit a friend in the north of St. Petersburg.
Yeah.
And I noticed right away, so we're coming off of KAD, which is they call it the Kaltsevaya Автодорога.
The ring road, yeah.
Big, huge highway that kind of goes all the way around St. Petersburg, and then Moscow has MKAD, the same thing, but that's more circular. Right. So we take the highway up north. We get off the highway, and they are in a very nice neighborhood, but the roads were like there were really big deep ruts
yeah.
in the road.
Yeah.
And I was driving, I was thinking, oh, I forgot about this. How can people, how can they have roads this bad?
Right.
That was definitely kind of like blaring thing that I noticed. Was there anything, that you kind of had forgotten about that just jumped out at you during your visit?
Well, I think we've talked about this before in other videos, customer service. There's a vast spectrum of customer service that you're going to get in Russia.
Right.
And in Moscow, for the most part, I still stand by my word from what I said in previous videos that it vastly is superior to customer service in the United States. That said, when you get outside of Moscow, St. Petersburg for the most part is close to Moscow, but when you get outside of Moscow at St. Petersburg, it is another level. My wife and I, we went to go visit, her parents in the middle of nowhere, and oh my gosh, customer service just absolutely horrible. Like you're a real burden on the people who are in the stores. It's like you're going in there to buy something, or you're at a restaurant and you want to order something, and they're just put off by the fact that you even exist and are sitting in the booth. They're just like, oh, when is he going to get out of here? You get that feeling. And so, I mean, I didn't forget about that, but that was something that was like very apparent.
Reiterated.
Yeah. Like, definitely didn't forget about this. One really quick story. When we got to her parents, it was very, very hot. Like very hot, close to 100 degrees Fahrenheit or 35 or 36 degrees Celsius in the, far away from Moscow, which is abnormal. But the baby, she's sweating and couldn't sleep. And I said, we'll buy an air conditioner. I will pay for it. So we go to the store to buy an air conditioner. And the guy tells us, oh yeah, somebody will, call you today and they'll come and install it in the next few days. Something to that effect. Well, we bought it. Not cheap, probably a month's salary of somebody or more of somebody who lives in that town. It was like $300 or $400. And no one ever called us. 2 weeks later, no one still had not called. We went back in there and the guy's like, what do you mean they're going to come and install? Like, they will call you when they're available and you will get the air conditioner when you get it. And I was like, well, but when we bought it, you clearly told us that it would not be weeks. And he's like, I have no control over that. And then he was all put out that, we wanted to return it because now it's not hot anymore. And it was just this whole ordeal. We had to fill out these forms to return it. And they say, we'll call you in 3 to 5 days to tell you if you can return it. And then after 3 to 5 days, they call us and they're like, you can bring it back, but only between these hours. And you get there and the guy's like arguing with you. Oh, maybe we can't give you the whole price. Yeah. It's just like, oh my gosh. The product and the service that was sold to me was never delivered, and they're arguing with me about taking it back. So that was very frustrating. Like I said, it was very hot. But those are just kinds of things to expect. On the other side of the spectrum, in Moscow, you go out to some of the nicer restaurants, and the service is absolutely fantastic. People are super nice. The food is amazing, and incredible ambiance and atmosphere. That was something that I definitely miss in the U.S. Just restaurants in Moscow. I was going to say Russia, but that's not true. Restaurants in Moscow are on a whole nother level.
I don't know. We did a couple different things while we were there. We went to register and we went to some restaurants. We went to some kids' places, to like these huge indoor playground type things, and we went to I got a SIM card and things like that. I can't say that we had a negative customer experience. It was all very professional, except at the post office. Like the old lady even said, like, I've spent 12 minutes with you. I'm supposed to spend 2 minutes on average with every customer. But I have to say, we had this one incident. So our son we were staying at a friend's house, and our son at like 12:30 or 1 a.m. he fell off the bed. He like rolled off the bed, which he never has done before. He rolled off and he lands in this weird position, and he broke his clavicle. And we're like, oh great. We have to now go through this in Russia. And, we haven't had any kids none of our kids have broken anything. I never broke a bone in my body. Right. So I was like, really worried. So we weren't sure. We weren't sure if
imagine,
it was the clavicle, you know. So the next morning, he's like in pain when he's like a year and a half, just over a year.
So
and a half.
you didn't know that he broke it in the middle of the night. He
we
calmed down.
we didn't know because we didn't know how he fell, and he hit his ear, and it was like bruised here. So we thought, okay, he just kind of hit his head, but there were no bumps or anything. So this was kind of swollen. So we're like, okay.
Yep.
But in the morning, we noticed when he would raise his arm, he'd say, "Ow, ow," and you know, he can't tell us anything. He doesn't speak that much at all. So we went to the local hospital near my wife's place, and we were like, you know, thinking, oh great, bureaucracy and free anything free. You know, you don't expect too much. So my wife is registered in that area at her home area. So we go to that hospital. We go in. I have Harvey in my arms. We go in. We go to the counter. She gives us like one form to fill out. We fill it out in 5 minutes or so, and they say, okay, go to the children's doctor. We go down the hall. Wait. There's one person in front of us, a kid on crutches or something. We get in there within 10 minutes. He's like, you know, yeah, I can see the bump there on his. I think he probably did break his clavicle. Here's the ticket to go to the X-ray room. Again, we were next in line. All very professional, all very nice. We didn't pay a thing for that.
Yeah.
And you know, the X-ray was done in a matter of minutes. We go back. The doctors, yep, and you know, you can see the X-ray. The clavicle is like broken, kind of like a wide V.
Yeah.
And he was like, you know, it's not that big a deal with kids if it's broken that way. And so he gave us he gave us this little band, and I was very, very surprised at the level of service.
Yeah.
At this public hospital. So was my wife, and she grew up there, and you know, they were very nice, very professional, and it didn't cost us the thing. I thought, you know, I'm gonna have to get my insurance, the traveler's insurance out and stuff, and you know, because my son is not Russian, doesn't have a Russian passport. So, but yeah, it was really great. Well, obviously, we can speak Russian, so that does make a difference. But the fact was that, you know, we got in, we got the service, and we were out. And then we went the next day. He checked it again, and he said, you know, just keep it immobilized, and he'll be fine. Now he's running all over the place.
Since we're on the topic of healthcare, I will give my story from Russia, which is also very positive. I have had like neck pain for quite a while from sitting behind a desk all the time. And in the U.S., I have very good, expensive insurance. I have been trying to get an MRI in the U.S. The insurance company had denied it many, many times. And so when we were in Russia, in the middle of nowhere in my wife's town, I made an appointment to get an MRI on my neck. We went in there, and they're like, it's going to be $40. But in the U.S., if you want an MRI, it takes like weeks in advance to schedule it. It costs $400 or $500 after insurance. It can be $5,000 without insurance. We make an appointment. My wife calls in the morning on a Sunday and says, you know, my husband wants to do an MRI. When is the next available time? I'm like, 2:00 today. Does that work? And Sonya's like, okay. Like, so we get in the car in a couple hours and we go to get an MRI. And I say, you know, how much is it? I knew it would be cheap, but I just wanted to know. And they said, it's going to be 2,300 rubles. So what, $35? No insurance, nothing. And I'm thinking, okay, it's probably on like this old, you know, machine. And so I said, okay, you know, actually, since I'm here, you know, sometimes my back hurts. I'll do a back MRI too. And so she's like, oh, but we actually have a deal. If you get 2 MRIs, the third one's free. And I was like, okay, I guess do my upper back too. So I paid $93. I got 3 MRIs. I was done in an hour. The next morning, they gave me a disc with all of the hundreds of images from the MRI, which you have to fight to get in the U.S. typically.
Yes.
And they even gave me a piece of paper with what the findings were, and it was an amazing experience. And the machine was a brand new Siemens MRI machine in the middle of nowhere, Russia. costs like $1 million for the machine, and they're doing MRIs for $23, so $32.
Wow.
And so that was awesome. And then the recommendation was to see a neurologist, which is just someone who does like bones and nerves. And so I just made an appointment. We were in the next city over, Perm. So I made an appointment just the same day. Like my wife called, we're having dinner. It's 5 o'clock on a Friday. And it says they're open till 9. So my wife calls and I'm like, oh yeah, you can come in at 8:30 tonight. And so I went in for $20. I saw a neurologist and, you know, it was great. She was very friendly, very nice. Again, during all of this, I spoke Russian. So if you're speaking English, I think this it wouldn't be easy. It'd still be the same price.
What I was thinking, you know, I think we mentioned this a couple times. Well, you know, obviously speaking Russian would be a huge benefit. But guess what? You could hire an interpreter and do these things and still save a ton of money.
Let me just put it into perspective. If you were in the US and you want or need an MRI and your insurance company will not cover it, it's going to cost you thousands of dollars. You can literally buy a business class flight from anywhere in the US to Moscow. You can stay at the Ritz-Carlton on Red Square, and you can get all the MRIs you want and pay for an interpreter and fly back and pay less than you would in the United States without insurance. It's absolutely incredible. The one thing I really dislike about the United States is the healthcare system. So we won't dwell on that. But in Russia, if you have routine or anything that's not some rare disease, you're much better off there, especially if you're willing to pay out of pocket just a little bit to go to the private clinics. Because sometimes at the state clinics, I would say your experience is probably not representative of all state hospitals.
That's why we were surprised.
Right. But if you're willing to pay just a little bit, so I went to the 2 private clinics for the MRI and the neurologist, and it was so easy. It was so easy. Yeah. It was super cheap, and you could do it on the same day appointments. For any Americans watching us, they know that's not even a possibility with the most expensive insurance plan in the entire United States.
Oh, I mean, you think it's bad in the U.S. Obviously, there's, you know, you have to call ahead of time, but in Germany, it's like weeks and weeks out. You know, there's no way you could go. I tried to go to a mechanic here, and they gave me like 2.5 weeks, and I'm like, next week I have to leave on my trip. Like I say, you know, can you squeeze me in just real quick? And they're like, nope, sorry. So I called around. Obviously, I got one, but you know, you have to fight for them.
I know. Everything in the United States, it works like 9 to 5. If you need something after 5 p.m., wait till tomorrow. Or you go to the emergency room and pay thousands of dollars.
And you have to take work off to do that.
Yep. No, I would say in general, the convenience of things in Russia, if you're willing to pay a little bit, was very impressive. I'll be honest, when I lived in Russia, I did not have as much disposable income as I do now. So being able to pay, you know, the little extra, it's really not that much. You know, if you think about it, you pay $20 to see a doctor instead of waiting in line weeks to see one for free.
And we do have to, you know, emphasize the fact that we're talking about, you know, expats in Russia, right? We assume that you have a higher salary than the locals Russian where you live in Russia. Yeah. So if you were to say that to a Russian, they'll probably say, "Oh, I go to the public or the state clinic for the routine stuff." Right. But I also went to for my kids sometimes, again, for routine stuff, we'd go to the state clinic and I'd go to the paid section of the state clinic.
Right, which they also have.
It was very, very good service. So I want to switch gears a little bit and something that I wanted to share, a trip that I took, which I thought was fantastic. I'm sure you can go on these types of trips anywhere, but I was invited by a couple Russian friends. We went on this like multi-day kayaking trip on the Voloksa River it's right? a couple hours from St. Petersburg, and it was absolutely beautiful weather. It rained a little bit, but beautiful scenery. Mm-hmm. You know, you're kayaking through these kind of narrow waterways and then into open lakes, and then we camped overnight on these like islands. So even if you go to St. Petersburg, that's something that I hadn't done when I lived in Russia. Well, I would go camping, but I didn't go kayaking, and I thought, man, I should have done this more often, while I was in Russia. We went camping quite a few times, but we didn't go do some of the more adventurous stuff, I guess. So, and we rented a kayak. I think it was like 1,500 rubles a day for the kayak.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it wasn't the most modern kayak. It was just like this aluminum frame. With what is it called? Kind of inflatable and sides.
Mm-hmm.
But for the price and the experience is quite nice.
That's awesome.
Do you have any? Did you have any kind of highlights of your trip?
Let's see. I mean, we enjoyed the whole time. It was great being near my wife's parents. They live in this, city far from Moscow in Udmurtia, which is 1,200 kilometers from Moscow to the east. And we stayed at their dacha, and that's always awesome, right? Because we should actually do a video on dachas, because that's one of the highlights of being in Russia. One of the trips that my wife and I took was we left the baby with Grammy and Grampy, and we went to Perm, which is the nearest city. It's like 4 or 5 hours away on the train from Glazov, the city where my wife's parents live. And it was absolutely fantastic. I was blown away. There are a million people in Perm, so don't get me wrong. I had been there before, but I didn't remember it being so nice. They've done so much work in the center, like they've done in Moscow, clean up all of the parks, and they've got all these fantastic areas where you can walk around. Everything's, built up, developed, lots of great restaurants, things to do. And they have this really nice, can't remember, embankment. I was going to say Naberezhnya, but like embankment along the river there. Oh, it was just fantastic. All these little things for kids to do, all kinds of activities, little food stalls. It was really nice. And we went there for 3 or 4 days. That was definitely a highlight. It was kind of nice to just be in a place that I hadn't seen for a long time, because most of everything we did in Russia was places I've already been. We went to St. Petersburg, we were in Moscow, and Glazov, where my wife is from. And I had been to Perm, like I said, but almost 10 years ago last time I was there. So it was really cool to see how much it's changed. We went to this one restaurant it was fantastic. It was a northern Russian cuisine restaurant. It's called Expeditia. They actually have one in Moscow, but it's super expensive. Even in Perm, by local standards, I guess it was expensive too. But it was awesome. One of the...
So what kind of cuisine, what kind of dishes did they have? What's northern versus other parts?
Yes. So they have a lot of wild game. So like they had holodets, but it was made out of wild boar and deer, I think. Or elk. I don't remember, but it was made out of some strange meat.
Alinina.
Yeah, that's deer, but it wasn't that. I don't know, but it was made out of wild boar and some other meat. And then I had a deer steak. It was really good. But the kind of famous thing that they have in the north is called stroganina. Have you ever heard of that?
Yes, I've tried that, yeah.
So it's basically frozen fish, and they slice it really thin, and they roll it up, and they brought it out on this big slab of ice, and they had like a couple dips, like sauces and things, or just salt and pepper, some people do, and you drink vodka with it. It came with 2 free shots of vodka as well. So it was really cool. You tried this new dish, and the fish was really good. It tasted really fresh. They told us kind of the way it works is it's super fresh, like almost sushi grade fish. They freeze it or flash freeze it. I don't remember exactly what he said. And then they immediately cut it up when you order it and roll it into this roll. That was amazing. But then in the Perm region, they have this dish, pasikunchiki, I think is what they're called. They're essentially like vareniki, but they're deep fried. And they have a little bit different filling. And then you dip them in this mustard sauce. That was really good too. I think they're pasikunchiki, something like that.
I've never heard of that. Yeah, I've heard of most everything you've said except the last one.
But that was a really cool experience as well. And when we walked in, the restaurant was completely empty. It was one of the highest rated restaurants in the city. And we got there, and my wife was like, "There's no one here." But it was great because the waiter, I know, typically it is, but the waiter, he was with us the whole time, explaining all the dishes and, different things about the regional cuisine that they have there from the Permsky Krai. And then he said some of the other dishes are from the far north, like Khanty-Mansiysk area. It was a really cool experience. So that was kind of a highlight, going to Perm. And then we went to the Kungor Ice Cave while we were in Perm. I don't know if you've ever heard of that.
Cool. No, I think
haven't. I don't want to sound ridiculous, but I think it's like the world's largest ice cave. So year round, we're obviously there in the summer. It's completely covered in ice inside.
Really?
Yeah, so it's like 1 or 2 degrees Celsius. So, I don't know, 33, 34 degrees Fahrenheit year round. It gets a little bit warmer during the day in the summer, but not more than like 4 or 5 degrees Celsius. And it was funny, we get there and they tell you like 10 times, it's going to be cold in there. And there's a jacket rental place. You can rent a jacket. And there's a couple of the Ruskiye muzhiki, like the big Russian guys. They're like, no, I'm going to be okay. And this one guy, he's in a short sleeve shirt and shorts and like flip flops. He's in there. He's like, clearly it's very, very cold. I was cold too. I didn't take a jacket, but I had 2 sweatshirts. And before the end, the lady's like, okay, if anybody's too cold, you can leave now. There's like 30 minutes left of the kind of tour. And the guy's like, okay, I'm kind of done here, and I've seen
enough.
Yeah,
it's boring.
and they lead him out. And as soon as he left, a couple people in the group just kind of chuckled because he was like the only guy. They asked him specifically before we walked in, "Do you want a jacket? It will be cold." And he said, "No. Normально."
Was it extra to rent a jacket?
Yeah, it was like 100 rubles. It was something really cheap.
Okay.
The ticket was kind of expensive, like 1,000 rubles to go in, but it included a tour. They kind of told you some of the local folklore from the region. So anybody who's isn't familiar, but those Finno-Ugric kind of groups in Russia, they have all kinds of folklore associated with them. They were shamans and stuff was popular way back when, and so they kind of talked about some of that, and that was interesting. But it was, as always in Russia with those tours, it's a little over the top. Because they're just like talking, and there's no questions.
Trying to
obviously.
get all the information, yeah.
yeah. So, but it was still a great time.
We went to this museum. What was it called? The Grand Maquette. In St. Petersburg.
I forgot to tell you to take your kids to that. That is my favorite thing in St. Petersburg.
So we went there. It was tough with the kids. They were just like, this is boring. But I mean, I wouldn't take my kids there again.
Really?
But it's super. Because.
Well, I guess for like Harvey, your youngest son, he can't touch anything.
You can't touch anything, right? You're looking at so for the audience, right? It's this huge model of Russia.
Mm-hmm.
Miniature.
I think it's 600 square meters or 6,000 square feet.
Yeah, we spent 2 hours there at least. But you go around. The problem wasn't the museum itself. It was fascinating, and the level of detail in the like figures, and there's trains going by, and the lights go dim, and it's it represents night and day, and there's all these seasons, and you see Moscow, St. Petersburg, Ural Mountains, and all of these places in Russia, and it's made to scale. But the problem was with children, and they want to touch everything, and you're not supposed to.
Right.
And it was.
They still have like the glass barriers.
So many people.
They had like glass barriers, like a foot or so.
Yeah, small, short. But I had to lift my youngest daughter
because it's kind of high.
Harvey over, and people are. And another thing is everyone is wearing masks. They're like, you can't go in unless you're wearing a mask. So, but the museum itself is really fascinating. And then we went to this other kids museum, like it was all these kind of Guinness World Record type place where you. Mm-hmm. So that was fascinating, and we get there, and I was like, I bought the tickets for everyone, and I was like, how much is a personal tour, just for us? And she's like, oh, that's 1,000 ruble. We have that, but it's 1,000 rubles, kind of implying that it was expensive. I'm like, 1,000 rubles. I'm comparing it in my head,
$15,
like, what is that? Like $15? okay, let's do it. Because the next one was the free tour, but it was like the free group tour in an hour. And I was like, I have 3 kids. They're not going to wait. So so I was like, okay, I can afford $15. So we had this like little, mini this individual excursion where she was just, we could ask questions and stuff like that. But again, speaking Russian obviously would be an advantage. But the other thing that I kind of wanted to mention was, I don't know if you had anything like this happen to you. I guess being in Glazov or a small town, probably. So on our way out of Russia, we drove from St. Petersburg. So we went from northern Germany on the ferry to Helsinki to St. Petersburg. And then on our way back, we drove from St. Petersburg to Pskov. I had lived in Pskov at some time.
Yep,
so I was kind of excited to go through there. And then Pskov is about 30, maybe 40 minutes from the border to Estonia. So I was like, okay, we're just going to drive through Pskov, cross the border, get to Latvia, and we took a ferry back to northern Germany. In Pskov, I'm looking up, everywhere we went, I was kind of looking up the best restaurants. And in the US, we were getting there at night, we stayed the night, and then we wake up. I was like, let's go to a breakfast place. Because in the US, you have breakfast places all over the place. IHOP, Denny's, I don't know. You can just go to a place and get a good breakfast. But in Russia, I looked several times, even in St. Petersburg, there wasn't a good, at least in the local area where we were staying, I didn't find a breakfast place. There were restaurants with breakfast items, but there wasn't a dedicated breakfast place. There were some like bakeries, they had, some things, but so I went to the like one of the top rated little cafes in Pskov, and it was way overpriced for that, like for Pskov, for the town. And the food was pretty bad. It was okay. It was edible, but I was like, I just thought to myself, if a foreigner could come to a small Russian town, so Pskov has like 250,000 people, so it's not tiny. A foreigner goes to a small Russian town, I don't know, 250,000, 500,000 people, and they just, start a small business like a cafe with really, really good food, and you would be, you'd have a really good small business. Because anybody could do better than the service and the quality 100%. Of the food that we had in Pskov. And it was top rated. I was surprised.
Well, so in Glazov, where my wife's parents live, there's really only 2 really great restaurants that we like to go to. And to be honest, I mean, they're not amazing. But compared to the competition, they're just a whole nother league.
Right. So that was kind of disappointing. But I also thought this could be a potential for expats, where if you go to Moscow or St. Petersburg or some of these, bigger cities, there's lots of competition. But in the, medium-sized cities, you could do fairly well, I think. Low investment and, kind of be the star of the town, where this American guy or this French guy or whoever started this restaurant, and for a little bit of capital you could set something up nicely.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. There's definitely a lack of good restaurants outside of Moscow and St. Petersburg. I mean, to be honest, I was very impressed with Moscow. I knew that they had a lot of great restaurants, but this last trip I was just very impressed with how great they actually were and how many there are.
Mm-hmm. So I think my kind of takeaway for this, so I had not been to Russia since late 2019, almost 2 years later with COVID and everything. Again, comparing everything as we traveled, and I was surprised by, I spent, I think, 3 times less for gas compared to Germany for my car, right? When I fueled up, I was like, I'll drive all day. I'll drive all day in Russia because the gas is so cheap. In Germany, it's like I don't even want to get into my car sometimes because I'm gonna, spend so much in gas. So there were things like that where I was like, this is so nice here in Russia, but there are also some things like the roads aren't so good, and I have to, I can't find a good breakfast place. So you always have to just, weigh the pros and cons to wherever you are. I still think there are some really great things about Russia, and you just have to, when you go there, you just have to realize that Russia's going to be great in different ways.
Yes, I think that's something that we should, stress all the time. There are many things that are amazing about Russia, but there are lots of disadvantages just as well. But you could say the same thing about the United States or Germany. I would even say where the United States is good, Russia's bad. And where the United States is horrible, Russia is generally better. So it just depends on what you value. I think if you have a young family, I think Russia's tough because if you want to replicate education for your children. I know you sent your kids to the German school, but if somebody doesn't have that opportunity, it can be very expensive if you want to give them any semblance of a Western education. Getting around with kids can be difficult, but on the same note, I mean, you could say New York City is probably the same. It's probably difficult getting around with kids there too. So it's hard because you're never comparing exactly the same two things.
Exactly.
So I don't know. Overall, I would say, Marcus, that I really love the time in Russia. Can't wait to get back. And I think you kind of share the same opinions. I know we kind of talked about a lot of the negatives, but I think sometimes we talk so great, that Russia's perfect, but there are definitely things there that are tough, and we should address those.
Right. Yeah, and I got a bunch of stuff because we were driving back. I got a bunch of foods that I couldn't find here, and I gave some to our neighbors, and just things that. So if you focus on the positive and especially for tourists, it's a good place because it's
amazing, yeah.
Very affordable, and if you're not used, you can kind of treat yourself because you can afford a better service, right?
Yes, that is by far the best. I will end on this. Before we left Russia, we were in Moscow for 2 days. I booked a room at a 5-star hotel. It was fantastic. It was, I think, $80 a night at the Hyatt Regency in Moscow. And every time you walk in, they're like, "Hey, Mr. Shannon, how are you? And do you need anything? Can we help?" And it was fantastic. So like, if you pay a little bit extra sometimes in Russia, it makes a huge difference. I will say that probably the main lesson I took away from this last trip was if you're traveling with kids, or I think it's also you just get older, right? When I was in Russia, for the most part, I was a lot younger. Right, I wasn't married. I just do everything the cheap way. But now, pay a little bit extra for those comforts, and Russia is absolutely amazing. That's what I took away from the trip.
For sure. Yeah, I echo that 100%.
So let us know what you thought about this video. I know it was kind of long, but we hope you enjoyed the video, and we will see you next time. This was Ask an Expat with Marcus and Matt from An Expat's Russia. We hope you enjoyed the video, and if you have a question about Russia, let us know in the comments, and we'll answer it in another video.